Hello everybody and welcome back to On the Mat. It's episode 2. Tonight we're talking about some of the most underrated superstars of all time. 5 to be exact. I've handpicked 5 that we're going to talk about tonight. Guys who didn't get the run they probably deserved, which of them deserve Hall of Fame spots, and which of them self-destructed. Last week we looked back on some of the best road stories and ribs from the past. I had to cut it short for some reasons. But tonight, we're live, we're balls to the wall. I want to point out that this season is going to be a retrospective look back on some of our greatest memories and favorite stars over the years. We'll be discussing some of the most craziest moments. There's going to be an episode called WCW Days where we discuss some of the best and worst memories from WCW. The final episode of the season is going to be called In Memoriam. We're going to look back on some of the heroes we've lost over the years and the legacy of memories they've left us. But today we're talking about some of the most underused and overrated stars of all time. We're going to discuss Tatanka, one of the most hyped undefeated streaks of all time, followed by some horrible booking decisions. We're going to look at Marty Jannetty, if he could have surpassed Shawn's career had he not self-destructed. We're also going to talk about Owen and why the fuck this man did not get the credit he deserved when he was alive. In 97, was he kept around just to screw with Bret? Did personal animosities overshadow some good business decisions? We're going to get all these on the mat right here. There's nothing worse to me than seeing a good talent go to waste. Just when we think we've got the WWE or whatever we're watching figured out, they throw us a curveball, and our favorite wrestlers will sometimes fail to please the powers that be, or they'll have some sort of personal issue, or what have you, and end up plummeting halfway down the card, or just vanish into the night, never to be seen again. I still can't get over this Rusev thing. I mean, this is just retarded. The only word I can think of is why. I mean, it doesn't make any sense why they bothered to even build this guy up and make him look strong at all, just to lose to Cena 3 times. He's still doing jobs at house shows, I hear. But hopefully tonight we can find out some of the answers as to why some of our favorite wrestlers over the years didn't make it as far as we wish they could have. And I want to start off tonight by talking about one of my personal favorite childhood favorites, a true legend, Chris Chavis, otherwise known as Tatanka. Somebody tweeted out a couple weeks ago that they thought that Tatanka deserved Hall of Fame. I replied and said that I totally agreed, and he totally deserved to be in there. And I was actually surprised to get a tweet from Tatanka saying that he appreciated me. I thought that was awesome, just to take 2 seconds to tweet a fan. That's what Twitter's all about, and it just makes me even more proud to be a fan. But Tatanka, Chris Chavis was born in Pembroke, North Carolina, trained by Larry Sharp. He started out as a bodybuilder, actually, and he was actually a divisional manager for Bally's from 1985 till 1990. He was offered a free agent contract with the Miami Dolphins and actually turned it down because Bally's paid more. Right on to Tatanka. Just by chance one time he was in a movie store renting a movie and ran into none other than Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. They struck up a conversation and Rogers thought that it'd be a good idea if he got into wrestling. Rogers got in touch with Larry Sharp and Larry ran that Monster Factory in Jersey and the rest is history. Tatanka broke into the business. He premiered in the South Atlantic Pro Wrestling called the War Eagle. He was actually the 3rd runner-up for Rookie of the Year for PWI in 1990. He won the South Atlantic title in 1990 from none other than Ken Shamrock. Yes, the Ken Shamrock. He actually was a wrestler before he was a fighter. Not too long after this, WWE took notice and it was off to New York. So, here's a guy that had it all. I mean, he had the look, the ring psychology, he knew how to work the crowd. WWE took notice of this, and immediately once he got into New York, they'd slapped this undefeated streak on him. I think it was the most legit of all time, and it wasn't anything like Goldberg's, which was, inflated every week by 100. Although he did lose a few times by count out at some house shows, which was never talked about. But he had a good run with Rick Martel. I thought these two were good together. Rick was a deadly worker, actually. Rick Martel. They had the match at WrestleMania 8, where Tatanka went over. He goes to Bashed in the USA and wins a 40-man battle royal. Continues the run with Martel again. They do the whole angle with Martel stealing Tatanka's feathers, which culminated in the Survivor Series match where Tatanka actually beats Martel and wins them back. And if you remember, the crowd went absolutely nuts when Tatanka beat him and got his feathers back. Not too long after, we're getting into 93. He's keeping up with this undefeated streak. He's going over every week, and he's getting major pops from the crowd. It looks like a major push. It looks like they're going to do something with him. WrestleMania 9 comes around. He gets the unbelievable pleasure of working with Justin Bieber. Shawn Michaels, I mean. And, things didn't go as planned. They made us think that Tatanka was going to get this push, and he ends up winning them by DQ, loses the match, and by this time, I think they'd made up their mind already that Shawn was eventually going to be the guy. Unfortunately, people did suffer for it. Between 94 and 97, I believe a lot of people were held down. I think Tatanka was one of the victims. Because this is where I thought Tatanka was going to go over. He should have gone over on Michaels, won the IC belt. These two had great matches. It would have went for one hell of a run with Shawn. But no, it didn't happen that way. Shawn wins the match, and a couple months later, I think Tatanka ends up jobbing to Ludwig Borga on fucking Superstars. Shortly after that, wasn't seen again for about 3 or 4 months. He comes back and he does the feud with IRS. He's got Chief Jay as his manager. I mean, he's still getting huge pops every time he comes out. He was over with the crowd. He was an amazing worker. I loved his comebacks. You know, the war dance that he would do, where he'd get down on the one knee and he'd kind of shake, and the crowd loved it. And I think the thing that made Tatanka so good is that he wasn't a gimmick. I mean, he was out there. He was Chris Chavis out there. He was a proud Native American. He was a true warrior of the business. He wasn't portraying a guy that the writers had given to him on a piece of paper. I mean, that was Chris out there. Anytime a wrestler does his thing from the heart, it always resonates well with the viewers. I think this is why I was so mad when they turned him heel. They did the thing with Luger where they accused him of selling out to DiBiase, and then ends up turning on him. This pissed me off because I knew at this point it was the end of any title run. It was the end of hope of any title run. I mean, at least it seemed that way. If you look at the rest of the guys that were in DiBiase's crew, like IRS or fucking King Kong Bundy, Bam Bam, you knew none of these guys were going to get any sort of push anytime soon. So seeing Tatanka in there really bummed me out. I was not pleased by the heel turn, although I thought his matches with Bam Bam were really good. Right after WrestleMania 11, I guess Bam Bam had turned face, and they sort of did that little feud. He took time off in the fall of 95 and came back for the Rumble in 96. Was eliminated rather quickly, and his last televised match in the WWE was against Bret Hart, in which he lost, of course. And then, citing spiritual issues and family issues shortly after, he left for a while. I mean, I was bummed. I thought they could have done so much more with Tatanka. This was a guy that had it all. I mean, he had mad pops every time he came out. I was very sad to see him go. Am I the only one that shit themselves when he came out at the 05 Rumble? I mean, I was super pumped when I heard the war cry, and then he comes out. I mean, that was great. Once again, he was eliminated not too long after, but it was nice to see him again. Right now, send me your tweets. Do you think Tatanka was misused? Should he got a title run, at least an IC, maybe even the big one? Let's get it on the mat. Somebody tweeted recently Tatanka for Hall of Fame, like I said, and I couldn't agree more. It makes you kind of ask yourself, what justifies a Hall of Fame spot? Is it doing what you're told, not ruffling any feathers? Is it being buddies with a guy that's high up, knows everybody? Is it notoriety? What it should be about is someone that commanded attention, was an unbelievable worker, won the crowd, and made us come back every week for more. If that is what it means to be in the Hall of Fame, then I think we should induct Tatanka. Send me your tweets. Do you agree? Disagree? Let's get it on the mat. I asked this week, I tweeted out and I said I was going to do this episode, and if anybody had any ideas on who they thought I should do as far as someone being underrated, I got a few comments back about Scott Steiner. So we're going to talk about Scott Steiner tonight. I believe he should be on this list. Talking about Freakzilla, Big Papa Pump, the Big Bad Booty Daddy, and the King of Burials. I call him the King of Burials because I think nobody can belittle a fellow wrestler like Scott Steiner can. If you don't believe me, check out any of his shoot interviews. He's got lots to say about Triple H and Ric Flair. He doesn't mince words. And unfortunately, if Scott did not like you, being in the ring with him was not a picnic. I think it would be the equivalent of wrestling a Freightliner truck. Scott Steiner was one of the top 5, I believe, stiffest wrestlers of all time. He's also one of the infamous Minnesota crew, the guys that came up from Minnesota, like the Road Warriors, Kurt Hennig, Rick Rude, Mean Gene, a whole bunch of people. He broke into the business in 1986, which was also the year I was born. He was trained by Jerry Graham Jr. in Toledo. He was actually an amateur wrestler at the University of Michigan. He was actually NCAA Division I All-American and placed 6th in the country, and was only 185 pounds, I think, at the time, which is hard to imagine for Scott Steiner, I know. He broke into the business in 86, won the WWA title in 1986, and eventually went off to Memphis in 88, became the CWA Tag Champs with Billy Joe Travis, and then from there it was on to the NWA or WCW in late 88, where he joined his brother Rick to form the Steiner Brothers. Shortly after Rick's feud with Mike Rotunda had ended. Mike Rotunda, of course, was IRS. They went on to beat the Freebirds for the NWA Tag Titles on November 1st, 1989. Ended up losing them to Doom, which was Ron Simmons, Butch Reed. He won them for a second time against the Midnight Express in January of 91. WCW said goodbye to the NWA, and the titles were renamed the WCW US Tag Titles. And they'd also won the WCW New Japan Tag Titles, and were then known as the Triple Crown Champions because they'd won all 3 organizations' tag titles. Scott went on to win the TV title in 92 after they broke up the Steiners, and that's when Bill Watts was there. And after a long contract dispute, Scott was gone and he went to New York. I like how Jim Ross talks about Bill Watts. He says one time Bill used to carry a gun in his briefcase because he was so scared of Scott Steiner. Bill Watts didn't like Scott because he hurt people. He intimidated the shit out of people, and he had said that he was ultimately a real problem. But anybody who knows anything about Bill Watts will know that people in glass houses should not throw stones. Yes, Watts used to smack some of the more feeble guys around back in the day. But to be quite honest, the stiffness that the Steiners brought to the table, I think, really saved kayfabe. In the 80s, there were one too many leg drops that just weren't really getting over on people anymore. I mean, it just doesn't even look like it hurts. And people were sick of arm bars and rakes of the eyes. We started to see some real moves. Like when they started doing the Frankensteiner. I mean, unless you were watching, Lucha Libre stuff in Mexico, you didn't really see this in the WWF or WWE. Just look at some of the belly-to-back suplexes that Steiner would do. Like they put Kurt Angle's to shame, I think. WrestleMania 9 versus the Head Shrinkers was actually probably one of the best matches on that card. And I think it paved the way for more realistic style of tag team wrestling. Like if you watch that match at WrestleMania 9, he picks up Fatu, at the time was around 300 pounds. I mean, they were big guys, and he would do a belly-to-back suplex, and he would just launch Fatu like 20 feet across the ring. I know it's wrestling and choreographed, but it just shows you how strong these guys were. like the WWE at the time was used to, like guys like the Bushwhackers who were going around and was basically a novelty and licking people's faces, and the Steiners just brought so much more to tag team wrestling at the time, and really were innovative in bringing that style. But they did have a reputation for being very stiff and hurting people. Brian Knobbs, actually, from the Nasty Boys, says in one of his shoot interviews that when they came in to the WWF, the Nasty Boys, nobody wanted to wrestle the Steiners because they were hurting guys. He said, we didn't care. They would throw us from corner to corner, and like the Nasty Boys, again, were not small guys, and the Steiners would throw them from pillar to post like they were 100 pounds. Said they would hurt us, but we loved it. We had some of the best matches ever. The Steiners were also famous for their hazing of young talent. Kevin Nash was actually asked in an interview one time if the rumors were true about the Steiners being bullies, and he says, yeah, if you consider being taped to a table and having a pencil shoved up your ass, then yeah, they were bullies. So there was definitely a reputation of them backstage. They were kind of the Bob Hollies, if you will, of the locker room in those days. Kevin Nash tells another story that one time Lex Luger walked into the dressing room, and he was all jacked up with his cowboy boots on, and thought he was bigger than he was. And Scott had actually come up behind him and kicked his feet together and watched him fall on his ass, and everybody laughed. But nobody was going to get up and fight Scott. I mean, so they kind of had free reign. Another good story I heard about him is the Oscar from Men on a Mission. They were all on a bus, and I guess Oscar wouldn't get out of Fatu's seat. He was being a real dickhead, and he was infamous for being a dickhead. Not too many people liked him, but he would not get out of Fatu's seat. So the Steiners and the Head Shrinkers took it upon themselves to they tied Oscar upside down like a urinal on the back of the bus, and they all took turns pissing on him. I think I've made my point about what kind of guy Scott Steiner is. Don't cross him. Some people will tell you he was one of the nicest guys there were. Like Stone Cold's got nice words about him. Just don't piss him off. As far as wrestlers, they were absolute powerhouses. Scott in particular, he always stood out. I think that they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I think they both do. And I say both because they both deserve it. And they were one of the few legitimate tough teams in the business, and they were tough, badass guys. Scott is actually still making the indie rounds. In fact, he was in a town about 5 minutes from here a few months ago, and I couldn't make it because I had to work. But holler if you think Big Papa Pump, a.k.a. the Big Bad Booty Daddy, deserves a DVD or at least a Hall of Fame spot. Send me your tweets, we'll talk about it. But in my mind, like I said, Scott Steiner definitely stood out. In a time where moonsaults and flips were not the norm. I mean, like Chris Jericho said one time, like a moonsault was a huge move back then, and it really was. And it still gets popped when people do moonsaults. Not to mention the Steiner line that he would do that would nearly decapitate people. I mean, it was the closest thing to JBL's Haymaker clothesline, I think. And the Steiners were innovative in bringing a more Olympic, acrobatic powerhouse feel to tag team wrestling at the time. They left in early '95, went on to ECW, and then went on to WCW, of course. But let's look at Scott in 97, 98. I mean, when Scott came in the early 90s, like, he was always a big guy. He was always jacked. But if you see him in 97, 98, we're starting to see the formation of Freakzilla. I mean, it was very clear to us that he was growing on a weekly basis, and I don't mean in popularity, although that was true too. But the size of this man had changed drastically. We're starting to see the Big Papa Pump, opinionated, burying machine Scott Steiner. Some of my favorite Scott Steiner memories are definitely his promos on Nitro. Like, he would go for an eternity sometimes, it seemed like. It was all hilarious. And it was always a straight shoot with him. I don't think any of that was ever scripted. He said how he felt, and they let him do what he wanted. Some of the promos he would cut on Flair, I mean, you would have him crying backstage. I mean, Flair would be in tears backstage because of some of the shit he was saying. But that's Scott Steiner. We got a lot of ground to cover tonight, so we're going to move on. Send me your tweets. Should Scott Steiner have a DVD or a Hall of Fame spot? And what do you think about him being an underrated superstar? But right now we're going to move on. And we're going to talk about the second guy that I got on my list here. This one's a bit of a... this is a hard one for me. And this is we're going to talk about Owen Hart. And what can I say about Owen that already hasn't been said? You know, he's a wonderful person. Never wanted to be a wrestler. But at the behest of the family business for Stampede Wrestling. And the fact that the whole family was invested in it, I mean, it just seemed like the right thing to do. I mean, if you remember after Brett and Davey and Jim and Dynamite got the call to go up to New York in '84, Owen was actually kept around. He stayed around with Stampede and actually helped keep it alive and spent a lot of time in England for the interpromotional Max Crabtree. Went on to be the international tag champions with Ben Bassarab in '87. And he was the 1987 Pro Wrestling Illustrated Rookie of the Year. I mean, he's had unbelievable talent. It was hard not to notice. '87, he also went to New Japan on a few tours. He defeated Hiroshi Hayes for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. He was the first ever non-Japanese person to do so. I mean, the fact that they would do this for anybody is such an honor. And Owen Skill was definitely deserving of that. And in '88, the WWE finally came calling after his success in Japan and after his Rookie of the Year thing. They signed him in '88. But immediately when they brought him in, they did not want people to know necessarily that he was Bret's brother. They weren't sure how to keep that from coming out, so they gave him the Blue Angel gimmick. And then later they changed the name to the Blue Blazer. I mean, immediately he was kept mid to low card. He was mostly jobbing to guys like Ted DiBiase. Things weren't really looking up for him. He felt discouraged. He felt let down. And ultimately he just wanted to get out of there, and he went back to Calgary. Ended up staying in Stampede until it shut down. And he did a match with El Chanek. I think that was his name, El Chanek. And they did a mask for mask match in which he lost the Blue Blazer mask gimmick and didn't see it again until much later. He was actually in the WCW in 1991 and was actually on about 5 televised matches. He was not willing to move his family to Atlanta. They couldn't come to a contractual agreement, so he actually went back to WWE and they took him back. But like I said, Owen never really wanted to be a wrestler. The only thing he wanted was to provide for his family. I mean, when you watch his matches, you could never tell he was an absolute professional. I mean, SummerSlam '97 aside, I mean that was just a bad day, I think. But he never wanted to quit until they put him with Koko B. Ware, the high energy gimmick. I mean, he literally thought that they were fucking with him. They were, keeping him down. But thank God that only lasted a short while. They only did the one Survivor Series. But if you go back and watch those higher energy matches, I mean, as crappy as a pair they were, Owen was doing some crazy stuff that wasn't happening in WWF at the time. Like he would do where he'd kind of run up the ropes and do the backflip down, and he was doing lots of stuff where he would jump onto the top rope kind of thing, and then he would land on his ass and do the backflip backwards. And I mean, that stuff wasn't seen in WWE at the time, and I think he was really innovative and was completely underrated from the moment he came in there. I think he deserved a bigger push. But he wanted to quit when they put him with Koko, and like I said, I'm glad that it didn't happen for very long. He had impeccable timing. He did some incredible stuff in the ring. And I think things really started to pick up for Owen in '93. That's when they teamed him with Brett, and we got to see two Hearts painting these pictures in the ring that were, in my opinion, above the rest. They brought this realness. I mean, you could see it every match they had together. You could see that they were really brothers, and that the animosity was really there. I mean, I don't think it was, because they never had an argument in real life between the two. But the realism that they pulled off in those matches and the stories that they told, I think, can never be duplicated. There was just an aura about them. In 93, 94, they did the USWA invasion type deal where Bret won the King of the Ring and he was feuding with Lawler. And Owen ended up beating Papa Shango for the USWA World Heavyweight Championship. But unfortunately that invasion angle thing was cut short when Owen suffered a knee injury and was forced to take some time off. When he came back, they did the heel turn at Survivor Series, which is where he became bona fide in my book. 1993 was not a nice year for pay-per-views. I mean, look at the Survivor Series. I think that was probably the worst Survivor Series I've ever seen. SummerSlam 93 was anywhere but epic. I'd have to say the Royal Rumble was probably the best pay-per-view, with Yokozuna winning. But when they turned Owen heel, we started to see some acting, and he was such a convincing heel. He started doing the angle with Bret Hart. Like I said, their matches were legendary, and he pulled off this heel. I mean, he just made you hate him so much. He was like the annoying brat little brother that was ungrateful, and I mean, he just did it so well. WrestleMania 10, I think that's my favorite Owen and Bret match. Just they told the story they told. It ended up with Owen going over with a very believable reverse victory roll, kind of like the thing they did at SummerSlam 92 with Davey going over. It was always my favorite pin. The brotherly feud hit home to us fans, I think, for me anyways. I had an older brother growing up who was an asshole, and I was never too fond of him. So I could relate to this gimmick. We got to see the heel Hogan. To this day, I don't think there was a better heel in history than Owen, that we loved to hate so much. He was so convincing. Another thing too, that most of these Bret and Owen matches were always a big spectacle. You always saw numerous Hart members down at ringside getting involved. Look at the cage match at SummerSlam 94, one of my favorite cage matches of all time. They didn't juice. There was no blood. They didn't use the cage as a crutch. I mean, they actually wrestled in there. They told an unbelievable story. I wish I could have met Owen, because behind the scenes he was anything but a heel, and it's too bad that it took till 97 for him to actually get a title run. I was elated when he won the IC title in 97, but he actually won the tag titles with Yokozuna as well too in 95. They were actually, they meant a lot more back then as well, but he was hilarious. I mean, some of the best ribs. Told some good ones last week. I don't remember anybody ever having a bad thing to say about Owen. I don't think they probably ever will. Things were hot in 97 when they formed the new Hart Foundation. They started doing the angle with DX. It was the Canada versus US thing, man. That was a hot time to be a wrestling fan. I was so proud of wrestling at the time. Like I said, it just made it so believable. I mean, the war between Shawn and Bret was believable, and that just amped it up even more. Unfortunately, November of 97, we saw the infamous screw job, and Owen immediately wanted out, but was told that due to his contract, being a slave to a contract, they would sue the pants off him if he tried to leave. So he was kind of stuck there. Bret was gone, and Owen was bound by a contract. And as if he never, as if he already didn't want out of wrestling. I mean, he was drowning in it now. May 23rd, 99, I mean, I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me when I heard the news. I was not able to watch Over the Edge. Didn't have it on satellite. Didn't get a chance to see it, and I'm forever grateful that I didn't, because I think it would have been too hard to watch. It should have never happened, and a lot of people have been pointing fingers over the years. ultimately, you know, it was an accident. But if Vince Russo knew the first fucking thing about ring psychology, it never would have happened. He would have found a way for Owen to get over. They wanted to turn him face again. They were going to give him the IC belt that night. And Vince Russo thought the only way that he was ever going to get over was to ascend from the ceiling as a fucking superhero. It never should have happened. I mean, I could go on forever about that. Bottom line, it was an accident. I mean, nobody wanted this to happen. It was hard. It's been 16 years and it's still a soft spot for me. It should have never happened, and Owen will never be forgotten. He'll always be in our hearts. Tweet me now. Should Owen have had a major run? Do you think his Hall of Fame induction is long overdue? Let's get it on the mat. We've all been told this week that the WWE is in works to make a DVD. I'm very happy about this, because if we look for history's sake, DVD is usually followed by a Hall of Fame induction. It happened for Bret, it happened for Macho, it happened for Warrior, lots of guys. Stone Cold, Shawn, all these guys had DVDs right around the time they were inducted. I hope he gets inducted. I gotta say for a minute here, this Martha Hart not being behind this project really pisses me off. It's been 16 years. It shouldn't have taken this long for a DVD to be made. I know they had one with the Hart Anthology where they kind of snuck it in there, but it was mostly excerpts from 1997. I mean, this is a full-length DVD that's going to be honoring Owen, and it really disgusts me a bit that he's not already in the Hall of Fame. And it disgusts me that she's not getting behind this project. It's about time he gets honored. It kind of disgusts me, like I said, that he's not already in there. I want to talk about Eddie for a minute, Eddie Guerrero. I mean, no disrespect to Eddie. He absolutely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, and I miss him very much. But Eddie passed away in 2005, and he was inducted in 2006 into the Hall of Fame. I mean, Owen died in the ring, doing what he did best, entertaining the fans. He's still not in the Hall of Fame. I mean, what does a guy have to do these days? Send me your thoughts on Owen. Do you agree with me? Do you think he deserves to be on the underrated list? This week, Owen would have been 50 years old. Rest in peace, man. You will be missed for years and years and years to come. At this time, I'm going to move on to our next victim here on the underrated list. Of course, Marty Jannetty. I guess this one is a little self-inflicted. But if we're going to talk about guys who had it all and went nowhere, we got to talk about Marty. My favorite Midnight Rocker. He was the guy that took Shawn under his wing and showed him the ropes in the AWA when Shawn broke in. Right off the bat, they hit it off, mainly because they both like to get shit-faced and chase women around. But when you're the new hottest thing in town and women are lining up, who the fuck is going to say no? But anyway, we all know the story of how the Rockers came to be. But I guess you could say this story really starts in 91. I mean, you're one half of the hottest tag teams on the planet. You've got everything going for you, money, women, etc. But when the respective egos, more so Shawn's, start doing the wrestling, things don't end up probably as they should. This is definitely a story of self-destruction mixed with a little classic Shawn Michaels politics. I think the story actually starts off in the AWA in 1985. Marty was already an established wrestler. I think he was already tag team champions with Bulldog Brown. He'd been an established tag team wrestler. So in 85, he gets a phone call from someone saying that they're sending this greenhorn down from Texas, this young kid. He was pretty small, he's pretty green. We want you to take him under your wing and show him the ropes. Of course, that ended up being Shawn. Shawn comes in, they hit it off quickly, like I mentioned earlier. They quickly realized that they shared a passion for partying. By this time, it was said to Marty that they were going to be a tag team. Initially, Marty was not pleased about this idea. He was hoping for a singles run. Like I said, he was already an established wrestler and now stuck carrying this greenhorn. Didn't sit too well from him. But from there, the rest is history, I guess you could say. They became the Midnight Rockers and quickly garnered a reputation for their in-ring capabilities as well as their out-of-the-ring antics. In 1986, the Rockers went to the NWA and then off to the WWE in 1988. They dropped the Midnight from the name and they were just strictly known as the Rockers. When they came into WWE, they were not welcome with open arms, to say the least. It didn't take long for people to sit up and take notice of their fast-paced, high-flying action. That style was getting a lot of attention. But backstage, like I said, there were a lot of people that were not happy that they were there. We know the story about Marty and Shawn at the bar one night, and I can't remember his name now, but started going on about these guys being big partiers, and the story ends with Shawn Michaels breaking the glass over his head, and next day at the office they're called in, and Vince walks by and says to Shawn, "Oh, nice boots, they're made for walking, you know," and says, "Oh, I'm just kidding," pulls them in the office, sits them down, and then fires them. It didn't last long for them the first time around in the WWE. But they went back to the NWA, and like I said, they were off to being a very innovative tag team. They got a lot of attention from a lot of people. To me, Marty was always the odds-on favorite to get the big push, though. You could tell Marty had a lot more. Things didn't really turn out that way. They came back to the WWE and started making the name for themselves. And in 1990, we saw one of the worst things ever. They were facing, I think it was the Bushwhackers, I want to say, and this jobber named Charles Austin. Marty went to do the rocker dropper, and I guess Charles hadn't tucked his head in time, and they fell back badly, and this guy broke his head and was paralyzed for a little while. He ended up suing the WWE and won for a very big amount of money. So not too long after this, we started to see the cracks in the Rockers. I told a story last week about Marty and Shawn getting into a brawl one night in the hotel room. I think this started to happen quite frequently. And in 91, I believe, they were supposed to have a long, drawn-out feud. It didn't happen. Marty was under house arrest and couldn't do the show, and was released in 92. First, I got to mention the tag match in 1990 on Saturday Night Main Event, where they were supposed to go over on the Hearts. I mean, everybody was waiting to see these two teams go at it in the ring, and they were finally going to get their chance. They were finally going to get their chance to win the titles. Saturday Night Main Event, the rope breaks. I mean, Bret Hart mentions that, yes, this was a taped NBC show, so what they could have done, they could have stopped rolling, fixed the rope, and started it over. And, I mean, only the finished product is ever going to get seen on TV, but they didn't do that. The referee wouldn't listen to anybody. It ended up being one of the worst matches in history. They were all pissed, and the Rockers ended up winning, but they had to give the tag titles back a couple weeks later. The real politic behind this was Neidhart was actually leaving, which is most of the reason why they were getting the titles in the first place. Neidhart ended up actually staying. So when the Harts got the title back, that was it. The Rockers never really got their shot again. Marty was released in March of 92, went off to the USWA and had a short feud with Lawler. And WWE took him back in October of 92 for his second chance. They did the feud again. They started right where they picked up after the Rockers breakup. They started that feud before Marty left. So they picked it up again, did the match at Royal Rumble 93. And once again, Marty was fired again after apparently being under the influence. They say that he was probably stoned, which to this day he denies. He says that he was extremely tired, wasn't getting very much sleep, and blames the whole thing on Shawn for starting the rumor. I actually could totally see that. I could totally see Shawn being Shawn, making up such a bullshit rumor just to get ahead. I mean, Shawn was not the nicest guy back then. If you watch those Rockers matches, though, like, go back and watch some of them, you can't deny that Marty was was the better guy. He was doing most of the carrying, actually, in the early AWA matches, I guess you could say. Marty carried Shawn for a long time, and he had so much talent, but way too many demons. Marty's partying had gotten really out of hand. They'd started the feud with the Brainbusters, Tully and Arn, in '89. It kind of dragged on for a year, with them going over with each other, simultaneously. It was clear the Rockers deserved more, but they weren't getting the push that they might have, people thought they deserved, and were far from the tag titles. They kept losing when they should have been winning. People weren't taking too kindly to the Rockers backstage at this time again. They were topping people's matches before the main event even went out. When people left the arenas, they were talking about the Rockers matches most of the time. Not just at house shows, but at major pay-per-views too. They ended up jobbing to the Twin Towers and the Rougeaus not too long after the summer of '89. And I think the ultimate embarrassment would be Survivor Series '89, when Marty was actually pinned in the Survivor Series match by none other than Bobby Heenan. Don't get me wrong, I love Bobby, but that's I don't think there's any bigger embarrassment than that. The Rockers would continue like this for the next year. Then in 1990, things started to look up when they were finally going to get the tag titles. Like I said, they had this shitty match on Saturday Night Main Event. Ended up being the worst match ever. So they were kind of stuck in purgatory after that for a while, until they did the thing where Marty accidentally hit Michaels, ending with the barbershop incident, where he super kicks him and shoves his face through the window. This was supposed to lead into an epic feud, but like I said, Marty started to spiral out of control and was released in March of '92. When they did bring him back, they started right back up, like I said. And my favorite part of this feud, I think, was the on Raw when Marty came out of the crowd with his hood up and did the open challenge and beat Shawn right there for the IC belt. I never thought that we were going to see Marty actually beat him, let alone come back. And he did, and I was tickled pink. They had the match at the Rumble where Shawn won the belt back, and then Marty again was fired for being stoned on Raw and was given another chance. In '94, he came back again and teamed with 1-2-3 Kid, and finally won the tag titles. It's kind of funny how he never got it with Shawn, but he ended up winning the tag titles with the 1-2-3 Kid after they beat the Quebecers. Ended up losing the titles back to them again, and then Marty just kind of disappeared. I don't know if he was released or if he just took off. Didn't pop up again until late in ECW in '95 and had a short feud with Shane Douglas. Then eventually was brought back for a fourth time in '95 to WWE, where he once again feuded with 1-2-3 Kid and stayed about mid to low card after that, until they teamed him with Leif Garrett, also known as Al Snow, to form the New Rockers. Not too long after this, Marty once again was feeling ripped off by the team going nowhere, and ultimately quit in '97. So we're seeing a pattern of a revolving door syndrome starting to unfold here with Marty, and it's too bad because, like I said, if you would have asked me in 1990 who would have been the bigger star between him and Shawn, hands down I would have said Marty. He had unbelievable talent, and you can attribute a lot of what Shawn went on to do in his career. You can thank Marty for that too, because like I said, he took him under his wing. Shawn was very green, and Marty helped shape him. And I think Marty could have gone on to be even bigger. But we thought we would never see him again. He actually went to WCW for a bit and had a couple of good matches with Chris Jericho and Booker T, actually. Went on and did the indie thing in New Breed Pro Wrestling, won the title in '99. Stayed in the indies for years. 2004 rolls around. Marty was very depressed and suicidal, and was actually telling a lot of people about it. I think it was a cry for help. His drug abuse had gotten out of hand, and it's not an uncommon thing in wrestling. But an old friend gave him a phone call and pretty much saved his life, and that friend happened to be Shawn Michaels. As much as it kills me to say something nice about Shawn Michaels, I'm glad that he did that. That was one of my favorite years of the 2000s, I'd have to say, 2004, because we saw the return of the Rockers. And Marty ended up getting the victory with the Rocker Dropper on La Resistance when he pinned Conway. I was just so happy to see the Rockers back out there. I thought that things had gotten better for Marty, and we were going to see him for a while. Later that year, Shawn was doing the feud with Kurt Angle, and Kurt did the thing where he said that he could do everything Michaels did in his career in only a month's time. This included beating Marty Jannetty. And I didn't think they were actually going to bring him back again, but they did. So they brought him back, and Marty had the match with Kurt Angle, and if you go back and watch it, that was a pretty decent match. I was very surprised. My favorite part of that match was when Kurt Angle goes to do the Angle Slam, and in midair, Marty kind of counters it and does a reverse back hip toss. It's one of the coolest reversals I think I've ever seen. It was pretty badass. The match was so good that Marty was instantly offered a new contract with WWE. However, didn't last long. There were plans again for a Rocker reunion in 2006, but Marty was actually on parole and could not leave the state and could not do the show. Therefore, was released again, and Vince had severed all ties at this point. And I mean, that was the last straw for Marty. Such a tragic story for a guy that had so much charisma and talent. Who knows, maybe Marty would have been Mr. WrestleMania had he conquered his demons. Who knows where he would have been, where he would have went. Definitely had an undeniable talent. He was always loved by the fans and was one of the few wrestlers who never turned heel. If you think Marty could have been the next big thing, send me your tweets. Does he deserve the Hall of Fame? Let's get it on the mat right now. I want to get on to our last guy, and I'm talking about Big Leon White, one of my favorite all-time big guys, Big Van Vader. For those of you who don't know, Vader was actually born in Linwood, California. He was not born in a cave in the Rocky Mountains, believe it or not. He was born 11 pounds at birth. That must have fucking hurt. His dad was an underwater welder in the Navy and patented a popular vehicle hoist that made the family very wealthy when they were young. He was an offensive lineman at the University of Colorado, drafted by the LA Rams, 80th overall draft pick, but was cut short due to a blown patella. He was spotted working out in the gym one time, and someone suggested wrestling, so he got in touch with Brad Raynes. Brad Raynes actually trained Vader, and not too long after he was in the AWA. They billed him as the Baby Bull, then later Bull Power, culminating in a title match against Stan Hansen. He was signed to an All Japan Wrestling, but Giant Baba actually traded his contract over to New Japan and called him Big Van Vader. He actually beat Hashimoto for the IWGP title. Became the first non-Japanese wrestler to do this. So pretty much for the last years of the 80s, he went back and forth from Europe to Japan, making a name for himself as Big Van Vader. In 1990, Vader faced Stan Hansen in one of the most legit, brutal matches I've ever seen. I'm sure most of you have seen it. Hansen accidentally broke Vader's nose before they even got into the ring. He was swinging that bull rope that he had and hit Vader in the face and broke his nose. He was bleeding profusely. And then not too long after that, once they were in the match, Hansen accidentally poked Vader's right eye out. You can actually watch that on YouTube. And it's pretty gnarly. You see Vader's eye come right out of his face. He's watch him pop it back in. It's so gross. He had to actually have a plate installed under his eye to keep that thing from falling out all the time. It's pretty gnarly. Match ended in a no contest, but it got the attention of WCW. Vader came into WCW in 1990 at the Great American Bash and squashed Tom Zink in under 2 minutes. And because WCW had an agreement with New Japan, Vader wasn't seen on American TV very much. They had him in Japan most of the time. So we didn't get to see him as much as we'd hoped, and it really kind of put a damper on building him up and making him, giving him any notoriety in the States, because he wasn't there half the time. It was kind of like the Ryback thing. America, like, I don't know, it was kind of funny. In 92, Vader and Bam Bam came back and did the IWGPM tag titles. What a team that was. Vader and Bam Bam were absolutely unstoppable. Two of the best big guys ever in the business. Vader ended up going against Great Muta and fucked up his knee pretty bad, and was the reason why they took the tag titles off him and Bam Bam in the first place when they lost to the Steiners. Vader was full-time in WCW in 1992. This is when they kind of started getting some heat behind him. They were actually building him up on a week-to-week basis. On April 12th, he faced Sting and actually gave him a Vader bomb and crushed his ribs and ruptured his spleen for real. And they had to bring in Nikita Koloff, who was the replacement, while Sting healed up. Sting was back for the Great American Bash just in time to lose to Vader for the title. And then Vader ended up losing it to Ron Simmons 3 weeks later because he had to have deadly knee surgery. But Vader was quickly regaining a reputation as someone who was too stiff, and he was hurting a lot of people. A lot of people did not want to work with Vader. He actually sent Nikita Koloff into early retirement. There was a jobber named Joe Thurman. Vader gave him a powerbomb and broke his back. But he had some amazing feuds, and some of the vignettes they would do for Vader, like the cave, and he's calling out Sting when he's in the cave in Colorado, in the Rocky Mountains somewhere, or that stupidly big, heavy hat that he used to wear. The big, I don't even know what you'd call that thing. Looked like a fucking scuba diver. But I think they did a good job in building Vader up and making him scary somewhat. I mean, I was a young kid when I remember watching Vader in WCW, and I was kind of frightened by the guy a little bit. But if you watch his matches, it's undeniable how much talent he had. 400-pounder doing these moonsaults and landing them and not killing people. I mean, it's got to say something for the guy. He went on to feud with Davey Boy Smith in 92, and he had some incredible matches with him, actually. And then he teamed up with Sid to form the Masters of the Powerbomb. In 94, he did that match with Foley in Munich, Germany, where Foley lost part of his ear. He got his head caught in the ropes. He usually just used to like to do that gimmick. But these ropes were particularly stiff and had some hard cables in them. And he couldn't breathe, and he tried to get out so hard that he lost part of his ear. But at this time, it was becoming dangerous to get in the ring with Vader, even though the Foley thing was not necessarily Vader's fault. It was somewhat expected now that someone would be seriously injured in the ring with Vader. He was then supposed to feud with Sid, but after the Sid Arn Anderson fiasco with the scissors, he was released. And Bischoff thought that Flair would be a good replacement, and the match would take place in Flair's hometown of Charlotte, North Carolina. During the match, there was an interruption with Harley Race. Flair ended up winning the match, won the title, beat him again at Super Brawl 4 in the Thunder Cage. And I gotta say, that's one of the things that WCW definitely did better than the WWE in the 90s, were these gimmick matches. Especially the Halloween Havoc, spin the wheel, make the deal stuff. I always loved that. You never knew what was going to happen. And it kind of gave it this on-the-fly feel that it wasn't scripted, but, I mean, ultimately it was. In 95, Harley Race was in a bad car accident and had to leave WCW, and could no longer be Vader's manager. So he was off to the races on his own. Ended up going after Hogan and did the match at Super Brawl 5 where he kicked out of the leg drop. Oh my god, he kicked out of the leg drop. What an upset. I mean, come on. I can't believe people were still getting over on that. That was just, sickening. Flair came down and did the 3 count, but ended up in a DQ for Vader. This led to the strap match at Uncensored. I always liked the Uncensored pay-per-views. I gotta say, that's probably one of my favorite WCW pay-per-views of all time. I always liked the King of the Road match with Dustin Rhodes. I thought that was a cool idea. Probably not the safest idea, but anyway, I digress. Ultimately, this ended up leading us into the Paul Orndorff Vader incident that I talked about last week, and that got Vader fired. So that was the end of the WCW run for Vader. 1996 was one of my favorite years because Vader went to WWE, and I always thought what it would be like if he went there. I thought he would wreak havoc. He was immediately hyped as the man they call Vader. Debuted at the Royal Rumble, drawing number 13. Eliminated about 5 or 6 people before ultimately being eliminated by something he probably could have ate for breakfast, Shawn Michaels. Shawn eliminated Vader and Yoko at the same time. I mean, that's hardly believable. But anyway, Vader was pissed and came back in the ring and wreaked havoc, eventually powerbombing Gorilla Monsoon, and was suspended because he actually, in real life, needed some shoulder surgery. He came back and did the feud with Yokozuna, interrupting his match against the Bulldog. This led to that schmoz at WrestleMania 12, helping make it the shittiest WrestleMania, I think. Although the Iron Man match was pretty good. Vader's team ended up winning, but Vader was a beast, yes, but he was also a big teddy bear, and it was very easy to hurt his feelings. Usually the biggest guys are the most sensitive. They were going to feud Vader with Michaels, which started with the SummerSlam match, which was controversial to say the least. Everybody knows, I guess, at one point in the match, Vader was stiff with Michaels, and being the little tit sucker he was, and still is, he started yelling at Vader, started swearing at him, and at one point, Shawn was going to come off the top rope on Vader, but Vader was supposed to move out of the way and forgot. So Michaels ended up jumping down on his feet about an inch from Vader's face, kicked him in the ribs and yelled at him, "Get up, you fat fuck." Well, this was the beginning of the end for Vader in WCW as well. It was clear that Shawn was untouchable and he was Vince's guy. I mean, it seriously wouldn't be a surprise to me if there were some kind of sexual favors going on between those two. Anyway, the feud was dropped and Vader slid down the card after having some okay matches with The Undertaker. He had the feud with Kane, the mask versus mask match, at the Over the Edge. On a post-match interview that he did with Michael Cole, he said that maybe Vader time is over and I'm just a big fat piece of shit. And it wasn't too long after that, I guess his final televised match was a Sunday Night Heat match against Edge, which he lost. If you've heard Jim Cornette's shoot interviews, Jim Cornette always has nice things to say about Vader. He says that Vader was horribly misused and misbooked. Shawn Michaels stomped and shat all over that fucking run, and that Vince wanted to change his name to the Mastodon. Yes, Vince, after a 15-16 year storied career where you're all over the world, it's time for a name change. Yeah, I don't think that would have flew, and I think he would have just pissed people off. But thank God he got out of there before that happened. In 2003, Vader shocked the world when he showed up at TNA to defend Dusty Rhodes. Didn't last long there either. On Halloween night 2005, Vader made it back to Raw in Jonathan Coachman's corner for a street fight against Stone Cold. But once again, Vader was off and left soon after that and went back to Japan. June 2012, he came back to Raw again and beat Heath Slater. And on the 1000th episode, he was the enforcer for Slater versus Lita. And Lita ultimately won that match. I'm not sure if people realize, but Leon actually suffered for a lot of years from alcohol abuse. And his wife actually divorced him in 2007. When she did, he quit drinking and underwent double replacement knee surgery. The wounds became infected, and he was actually bedridden for about 6 months. Once he got out of the bed, he was on his way to Japan one time for an autograph session and passed out on the plane, and ended up being in a coma for over a month, and lost over 100 pounds. Leon is now a born-again Christian, but is ultimately one of the best big guys in the business. The moonsaults he did, and he got over. He was scary. He was one of the best heels. I think he was totally misused, underrated. If it wasn't for Shawn, I mean, who knows? He could have been WWE champ. I would have liked to see it. Do you believe Vader was robbed in his WWE run? Do you agree that he deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame? One of the most agile guys we've ever seen, landing perfect moonsaults. Like I said, 400-pounders is a huge success. Send me your tweets on Vader. Well, this has been fun. I'm getting more passionate as the weeks go on, and thanks for tuning in to On the Mat. We will be back next Saturday for an episode called WWTF. We're going to be talking about moments that made us say, what in the actual fuck did I just see? Thanks again for tuning in. Folks, keep your stick on the ice, and we'll see you next Saturday.